What if I told you that the classic early bird gets the worm advice is probably the worst fishing strategy you could possibly use in January? We spend so much time and money on the latest gear, the perfect lure, the most detailed maps. But what if the reason you're not getting bites has nothing to do with any of that? Today, we are talking about the clock. We're going to talk about why fishing, when it's convenient for you, is costing you fish. And by the end of this video, I promise you'll understand the specific, often ignored, time window that can turn a dead January day into one you'll talk about for weeks. Think I'm wrong? Let me ask you this. When was your last truly great fishing day in January? Was it at the crack of dawn or later in the afternoon? Drop your answer in the comments right now, and let's see what the real data says. Look, we all do it. We get into habits. Maybe your dad or grandpa always had you on the water before the sun came up, swearing that was the magic hour. Or maybe your schedule is just tight, and you can only sneak away for a couple hours on a Saturday morning. So you go then, because fishing in the morning is better than not fishing at all, right? The idea that dawn and dusk are the prime feeding times is hammered into us from our very first cast. And in the spring, summer, and fall, that's often true. But January is a different beast entirely. Fish in cold water are not the same aggressive animals they are in 70-degree water. Their entire world slows down. And clinging to warm weather tactics in a cold weather world is the number one reason so many anglers go home frustrated and empty-handed this time of year. Let's start with the hard truth about January fish. Their metabolism is in the tank. Think about it like this. Imagine you wake up in a house that is barely above freezing. Are you going to leap out of bed and sprint to the kitchen to cook a 5-course meal? Of course not. You're going to move slowly. You're going to conserve every bit of energy you have. That is a bass, or a trout, or a walleye in 38-degree water. They are not interested in chasing down a fast-moving meal just for the fun of it. Every single move they make is a calculated decision based on energy spent versus energy gained. They are survival machines, and right now, survival means being efficient. Understanding this single fact is the first step to changing your winter results. So, if the fish are lethargic and trying to save energy, why on earth would we fish for them at the coldest part of the day? That brings us to the biggest myth in winter fishing, the sunrise bite. You picture it in your head. The frost on the boat, the steam coming off your coffee, the quiet solitude. It's a beautiful scene, but from a fishing perspective, it's often a total waste of time. Overnight, the water has lost all of its residual heat from the previous day. That period from before sunrise to a couple hours after is when the water temperature is at its absolute lowest point. The fish are at their most sluggish. The bait fish are inactive. The entire aquatic world is essentially in a deep sleep, waiting for a reason to wake up. You can be out there with the most expensive lure in the world, making the most perfect cast, but if the fish are basically in a state of suspended animation, it doesn't matter. It's like dangling a steak in front of a guy who just finished a giant Thanksgiving dinner. He's not interested, no matter how good it looks. I've seen it 100 times. Guys get to the ramp in the dark, fish hard for 3 or 4 hours, and then pack it in by 10 a.m., complaining that the fish just weren't biting. Well, they were right. The fish weren't biting. Yet, they left right before the dinner bell was about to ring, and they didn't even know it. So if the morning is a bust, what's the trigger that gets things going? It's the one thing we get for free every single day: the sun. Even on a cloudy January day, solar radiation is penetrating the water's surface. It's a slow process, but that solar energy begins to warm the water column ever so slightly. We are not talking about a massive temperature change. You're not going to see the water jump 10 degrees, but a change of just 1, maybe 2 degrees, is a monumental event in the world of a cold-blooded fish. That tiny little uptick in temperature is the signal. It's the alarm clock that tells their cold, slow bodies that it might be time to start thinking about finding a meal. This warming effect is the absolute key to everything. Think of the sun as the engine of the entire food chain in the winter. As it warms the top layer of the water, even a little bit, tiny organisms like phytoplankton and zooplankton become more active and rise higher in the water column. They are the base of the food pyramid. And what eats them? Baitfish, shad, shiners, minnows. They follow that food source and become more active themselves. They start to move around more, positioning themselves in these slightly warmer, more comfortable zones. They are waking up, and where the baitfish go, the predators are never far behind. You see, you're not just waiting for the base to get active. You're waiting for their food to get active first. This leads us to the new golden hour, the real prime time for January fishing. It's not dawn, and it's not dusk. It's midday. Generally, that window from around 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. is when the water has absorbed the maximum amount of solar energy for the day. It has reached its peak temperature, however modest that peak may be. This is when that 1 or 2 degree temperature difference is most pronounced. This is when the bait fish are most active and concentrated. And this is when a lethargic bass is most likely to decide that the energy cost of chasing down a meal is finally worth the reward. It completely flips the script on everything we've been taught about fishing. Think about a real-life situation. You've been out since 7 a.m. casting a jerkbait until your arm is sore. Nothing, not a single tap. You're about to call it a day, but you decide to have lunch in the boat first. It's around noon, the sun is high, and it actually feels a little bit warmer now. You finish your sandwich, make a few half-hearted casts while you're thinking about heading home. And then, bam! You get a bite, and then another. Suddenly, in the span of an hour, you've caught more fish than you did in the previous 4 hours combined. That wasn't a coincidence. You didn't suddenly become a better fisherman. You just happened to finally be fishing during the right time window. So how do you use this knowledge in a practical sense? You start thinking like a solar panel. You need to identify the parts of the lake that are going to absorb the most sunlight and warm up the fastest. This means focusing your efforts on the northern side of the lake or a northern bay. Why the north side? Because it gets the most direct all-day sun exposure from the southern sky. A bank on the south side of the lake might be in shadow for a huge portion of the day, keeping it colder for longer. It's a simple little detail that makes a world of difference. Let's dig deeper into location. Within that sun-drenched northern bank, what are you looking for? You're looking for objects that absorb and retain heat. Things like rock. Riprap banks, chunk rock, and boulders are fantastic because they soak up solar energy and transfer that heat into the surrounding water, creating a little microclimate that's a few degrees warmer. This is a fish magnet. The same goes for dark-bottomed areas or laydown trees. Anything that can absorb that sunlight is a high percentage target. You are literally fishing for heat. Your electronics are a critical tool here. And I'm not talking about just using them to find fish arches. In January, your surface temperature gauge is one of the most important pieces of information you have. As you move around the lake, keep a close eye on it. When you're idling from a shady bank into a sun-drenched cove, you might see that temperature reading tick up from 41.2 degrees to 42.8 degrees. That might seem like nothing to us, but to a fish, it's like walking from a cold garage into a warm living room. That's the spot. That's where you need to slow down and pick things apart. Now, what about lure selection for this midday bite? You can finally speed things up a little bit, but not too much. Fish are more willing to react, so a slowly retrieved jerkbait with long pauses, or a swim bait crawled along the bottom, can be deadly. You're trying to imitate a bait fish that is feeling a little more energetic but is still cold. You're not burning a spinnerbait back to the boat like you would in May. The key is that the fish are now in a feeding mood. They are positioned in these warmer areas, and they are actively looking for an easy meal. Your job is simply to present it to them during that specific window. Let's contrast this with the typical evening bite. In the summer, as the sun goes down, the water cools off, and the fish become more active. In January, the opposite is true. As that sun starts to dip toward the horizon, the water immediately begins to lose the little heat it gained. That peak temperature window closes fast. The bait fish scatter or go dormant, and the predators follow suit. That magical last hour of daylight in the summer is often the first hour of shutdown in the winter. By the time it's getting dark, the party is already over. The fish are going back into energy conservation mode for the long, cold night. I remember talking to an old-timer at a boat ramp one freezing January afternoon. I was coming in, and he was just getting ready to launch his boat at 3 p.m. I thought he was crazy. I told him, "Man, you missed it. The bite was dead all morning." He just smiled and said, "Son, I wasn't fishing for the morning bite. I'm here for the dinner bite, and it's just about to start." He knew the secret. He was intentionally skipping the cold, dead morning and arriving just in time for that peak afternoon warmth. He was fishing smarter, not harder. That conversation stuck with me and changed my whole approach. Let's be clear. This isn't just a theory for bass fishing. This principle applies to most predatory fish in the winter. Trout will move into shallower, sun-warm flats to feed. Crappie will suspend higher in the water column near heat-absorbing structure like dark-colored bridge pilings. They are all slaves to the temperature. They are all looking for that slight edge, that small pocket of comfort and activity. By focusing on the midday period, you are aligning your fishing time with the peak activity of the entire ecosystem, from the bottom of the food chain to the top. Now, does this mean you can never, ever catch a fish at sunrise in January? Of course not. This is fishing, and there are always exceptions to the rule. You might have a string of unseasonably warm, cloudy, and stable weather days, and the bite might be more consistent throughout the day. A major weather front moving in can trigger a bite at any time, but we're not talking about the exceptions. We're talking about the rule. We are playing the percentages. On a typical cold, high-pressure day in January, the odds are overwhelmingly stacked in favor of a midday bite. Why would you bet against the house? Think about how much this simplifies your approach. You no longer have to force yourself to get up at 4 a.m. to be on the water in the freezing dark. You can have a relaxed breakfast, get your gear ready without rushing, and hit the water around 10 or 11 a.m., just as things are starting to get good. You can focus your energy, both mental and physical, on a smaller 4-hour window, instead of trying to grind out a full 8-hour day. It makes your time on the water more efficient, more productive, and frankly, a lot more enjoyable. No more freezing for 4 hours with zero results. This is a perfect example of how we often make fishing way more complicated than it needs to be. We get obsessed with lure color, line diameter, or the exact action of a rod. And all of those things can matter, but they are secondary. They are optimizations. The primary factor is first finding fish that are willing to eat. And in January, that willingness to eat is tied directly to water temperature and the sun. You can have the best lure in the world, but if you're presenting it to fish that are in a non-feeding mood, you're just practicing your casting. Let's consider the opposite. Let's say you're a guy who can only fish in the afternoon, after work. In the summer, you might feel like you're missing out on the best morning bite. But in January, you're actually in the perfect position. Hitting the water at 1 p.m. gives you the prime 2-hour window of peak heating. You are arriving right when the dinner bell is ringing loudest. So that schedule that felt like a disadvantage in July is actually a massive advantage in January. It's all about adapting your strategy to the season, not just sticking to one rule book all year long. The mental shift is the most important part. You have to stop thinking, I'm going fishing from 9 to 5. Instead, you need to start thinking, I am going to target the warmest water I can find during the warmest part of the day. This changes everything. It changes what time you go. It changes where you go on the lake. It changes how you approach a piece of structure. You're no longer just randomly casting. You are on a specific mission to find the most life-sustaining conditions available because you know that's where the fish will be. So, the next time you plan a January fishing trip, forget about setting that alarm for a painfully early hour. Let the sun do the hard work for you. Let it wake up the lake. Plan to be on your best, sun-drenched spots starting around late morning. Watch your temperature gauge like a hawk, and be ready. Because while everyone else is packing up to go home for lunch, complaining about a tough bite, your day might be just getting started. You're not fishing on your schedule anymore. You're fishing on the fish's schedule, and that makes all the difference. So let's wrap this all up. For years, we've been conditioned to believe that the crack of dawn is the magic hour. But in the dead of winter, we've seen that this is often a recipe for a long, cold, fishless day. The real secret, the pivot point for your entire winter strategy, is to stop fighting the cold and start following the sun. The most crucial takeaway is this. Stop fishing based on tradition or your own convenient schedule. Start fishing based on the sun's schedule. That midday window, from late morning to early afternoon, the one most anglers are skipping to grab a burger, is your new prime time. That's the moment when the water is at its warmest, the bait is most active, and the predators are most willing to feed. This single adjustment in your timing, this simple decision to fish from 11 to 3 instead of 7 to 11, can be the difference between a total bust and an epic day. It's not about buying a new piece of gear. It's about using your watch. Thank you so much for watching. If this video changed how you're going to approach your next winter trip, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more tips that go against the grain. Now I have to ask, what's the most unconventional or wrong time of day you've ever had an incredible fishing experience? Let's share some stories in the comments below. Stay warm, and I'll see you on the water.